Good afternoon. My name's Edward Hughes, and welcome to our CEO Forum webinar for the HBS Club of San Diego. Before I introduce our esteemed guests, let me share a few slides with you. All right, as I say, welcome to our CEO Forum event. We're delighted to have you. Thank you for our sponsors for sponsoring these type of things. We have a number of HBS Club members and we have guests. Many of you are in San Diego. Some of you are not. For those who are not in San Diego, this may be one of the few days a year where we don't have blue skies and 70-degree weather. We have a little bit of rain. It's not always perfect in San Diego, but it's pretty close to it most of the time. So our mission as a club is to continue to educate leaders who make a difference in the world and make San Diego a great place to live and work. And we do that through a number of activities. Some of you will have received our full newsletter that outlines the program we did last year, our mission, and some of the activities. But let me cover a few of these topics. First is our CEO Forum, and that's what we have today, where we get esteemed guests come in and talk about their business, their industries, and some of the challenges and some of the activities that are going on. Over the last 12 or so months, we've had a nice list of CEOs, including from Stone Brewing, Callaway Golf, now Top Golf, Callaway. We've had from Cirrus Aircraft. We've had a couple of HBS professors and the San Diego Water Authority and Community Power Authority, as obviously utilities are a big deal in San Diego. So we've been having a nice mix. Some of our upcoming events include Aaron Zaslansky, who is the CEO of Flock Freight, on December 14th. He's got a very cool story where he's using his company to consolidate freight. So it's a green story and basically, make freight more efficient. We've got a holiday party in Del Mar that's for members only. If you haven't signed up, please do sign up. It is a limited number of spaces. So it's first come, first served. We have Mick Farrell, the CEO of ResMed, a medical device company, on January 11th. And then Tom Penn, who's the CEO of San Diego Football Club, which is on February the 6th, which is kind of going to be interesting. As many of you know, Major League Soccer has given an expansion team to San Diego. So we're delighted to hear about that. Even though they're not starting playing until 2025, it's going to be kind of interesting to hear about what's going on with soccer because obviously that is the world's #1 game. And I can say that as an Englishman. Most Americans think it's the NFL. Our second thing we do is management development programs, where we bring a slice of HBS or Boston to San Diego. And we do that in the fall with a for-profit program and in the spring with a non-profit program. And I'll talk about that in a second. And the third thing is our social enterprise initiative, which is kind of ties back to our mission, which is making San Diego a great place to live and work. And we've done that a couple of different ways. One is we've sent about 41 CEOs of nonprofit organizations back to Boston for a week-long program called Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management. And the second is we have donated cash dollars we earned from the management development program. So cumulatively, we've invested about $500,000 between management education and our cash donations into our nonprofit community. As I say, the big thing has been really kind of helping these CEOs. Our philosophy is if we can teach them how to fish, they can have a meal for the rest of their lives, rather than just doing a handout. So ideally, if HBS helps with some leadership and some training, they can make their organization stronger. This year, we had the opportunity to send 3 terrific CEOs, John Van Cleef from Community Resource Center, Todd Tibbetts from the YMCA, and Drew Moser from Lucky Duck Foundation to HBS, and they all had a wonderful time there. And the second part of that is we bring HBS to San Diego with this local nonprofit program. And for those of you involved in nonprofits, if you're on the board, this program starts in January. It's on our website. It's 7 weeks, 14 cases on Monday evenings in Sorrento Valley. Last year, I think we had 45 people attend. There was a wait list of 20 plus people. So we expected to be sold out again this year, but super excited to participate in that and see that happen. And then final, social networking. So our holiday party, as I say, is coming up. We're going to be starting doing quarterly members happy hours. We've got a couple of panels coming up, a space panel, innovation panel, looking to put together a talent panel as well. Today's format is going to be a webinar format. There's going to be a lot of people logged in. And so in order to keep distractions to a minimum, it's going to be a fireside chat type format where I'm going to be asking David some questions and talking about different things. But please feel free to type in questions in the question box, and I will try to get them at the end of the session or during the session as well. So with that, let me pause the share. And so David is, we've had the opportunity to have him a couple of times. First one, he was the CEO of Competitor Group. Another time when he came back and has been the CEO of TaylorMade. And so we're delighted to have him. David's been the CEO of TaylorMade Golf since 2015. And he did a terrific transformation and turnaround of that, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. He worked with Adidas, their parent company, and sold that to KPS Capital. And then more recently, in 2021, KPS Capital sold that to Centroid Investment Partners. So he's done a couple of private equity transactions, which again, from a business standpoint, we'd love to hear more about that. He's been at TaylorMade for at least 15 years. Obviously extremely well known in the industry, extremely well respected for his leadership, for what he's done for the organization. So David, it's a delight to have you back. Thank you for joining us today.
Edward, thank you for the invite back. It isn't often I get invited back for a second or even a third time, so I'm honored to, and I'm grateful for being with you and the HBS Club of San Diego today. I'm inspired by all the different things that you're doing in your lead and that you had in the deck. I know how important the club is here in San Diego and how certainly impactful HBS is to many of us throughout the course of our professional lives. It's an honor to be with you all.
Well, it's an honor to have you again. And for full disclosure, I used to work at TaylorMade a long time ago. So if I throw out a few things about TaylorMade, that's because I was there. I enjoyed my time there. So I'd like to kind of break this about 45 minutes into three sections. Firstly, talking about the golf industry. And then we'll talk more about TaylorMade Golf specifically. And then finally, a little bit more about you, David. So I happened to be at an event last week the ACG put on, which is a really good event talking about the golf industry and the pandemic. And pretty much it was golf operators, course operators, and they were very enthusiastic about how the golf industry's come through the pandemic and some of the changes that have taken place. Can you, maybe from your perspective, what happened in the pandemic and how did golf and equipment companies do?
Yeah, happy to. I'll start with the end in mind. Fortunately, I mean, unfortunately, given the global nature of this pandemic and the sadness that ensued from this pandemic through it, loss of life, health issues, the silver lining for us from a business standpoint was that golf really became a true beneficiary from active lifestyle choices and social changes as it relates to how people spend their time and where they spend their time. And fortunately, golf was one of those areas that truly saw an influx of participation into our game and subsequently our business. So, golf is a participation sport. And the more participants we have and the more frequent that those participants play the game, the better off we all are. We entered into the pandemic in a relatively flat to maybe what I call a subtly declining state, or roughly 50 million golfers around the world. We'd see attrition of maybe a half a point or a percentage point of participation on an annual basis, then offset by a half a point of gain. But relatively speaking, leading up to the pandemic for a decade before it, golf was relatively flat, if not trending slightly, just slightly down. But what we did know throughout the course of that period in time, and all industries, as your group knows here, has moderate degrees of cyclicality. They go up, they go down. They're affected by macroeconomic issues. They're affected by social issues. They're affected by environmental issues. But what we did know in the 10 years even leading up to the pandemic was there was a group of what we called latent demanded golfers, which is all the data that we would acquire, both independent data, third-party data, and internal data indicated that while there were 50 million active participants playing golf around the world, there were another 25 latent demanded golfers, as it was coined, which are individuals that have expressed at some point in time that they're interested in learning the sport or interested in embracing the sport or trying the sport, or historically had actually played the sport, left the sport, would consider coming back. And so the real opportunity existed for our industry to activate that latent demand pool. So how can you get a percentage of those 25 million golfers back into the populace that's actually participating, and as a net result, see some growth across the industry? And so there are a lot of initiatives in place, some from TaylorMade, some from our competitors, some in coordination with the National Golf Course Owners Association that you mentioned, or the PGA of America, who really governs the sport at the club level. And some of them we're finding some progress points, and some of them we're not. But we knew that if we can dip into that repository of 25 million, that we all could benefit. When COVID hit, to answer your question, golf became in vogue because you could do it. The world shut down, and those of us that aspire to be outside, to have activity, can do it in a safe environment, that weren't heading into the office, that had more discretionary time on their hands because they were either working from home, they were working less because certain businesses were literally shut down, including ours for a short period of time. And we can get into that. The net effect was golf courses in most parts around the country and around the world were fortunate enough to stay open and put the appropriate health and safety protocols in place to create an environment that was safe for those individuals that wanted to play, those that were playing to come to the club, private or public, and play. And so what we saw happen miraculously, literally over a 12 to 18 month window, 21 into 22, was roughly, depending on what data source you lean into, 6 to 8 million new golfers come into the game. 6 to 8 million on a base of roughly 50. So call that 12 to 14%, 16%. And those golfers, they needed equipment, they needed club memberships, they needed golf balls, and probably needed more golf balls than most because they were more recreational play, didn't play at the same skill level, so they would turn through a consumable faster. And as a net result, what became a demand-driven quest prior to the COVID became a supply-driven challenge working through COVID, because you got to ramp your supply chain to meet that demand curve. And then it wasn't just the new players coming, Edward. It was those that were playing advanced their replacement cycles quickly because they were playing more. So the number of participants grew from, call it 50 to somewhere in the range of 56 to 58 million around the world. And then beyond that, those that were playing started to participate more frequently. So the avid core and recreational players that would average 6 to 8 rounds of golf a year, if you added them all together, we're now playing 12 to 14 rounds of golf a year. So they're going through equipment faster, they're going through golf ball faster, they're going through gloves faster. And so how do you ramp an established supply chain to be able to meet those needs as we're returning, manufacturing labor, assembly labor back to these facilities in an environment at the time that really was not conducive to hand-to-hand combat and building something and touching something. So it was quite the process to navigate through that, not just, I'm sure, for TaylorMade or for golf, but many of your business leaders on this call today. What a moment in time for golf, and what a moment in time for the world. And I'm thrilled that we've come out the other end. And I think the end game here is it's sustainable. And that was the question, which is, okay, you've got a bunch coming in, you've got a bunch that are in that are playing more. When we come out of this, God willing, with greater health and safety protocols around the world, and you can play and return to some level of normalcy in your life, will everybody stay? And the one thing we all know about golf, and we placed the bet that they would, and we invested behind that they would, when even some of our competitors and suppliers did not. And so we started to fund supply chains. We started to fund consumer engagement activities. We tried to come out stronger than the strength we had when we entered. And that's the aggressive, innovative nature of our company, which really, in many regards, defines TaylorMade through the commercial markets and the consumer markets. But the net effect is, here we are wrapping up 2023. We still have somewhere in the range of 56 to 58 million golfers around the world. Frequency remains the same. Rounds of play are going to be up roughly 3 to 3.5% this year. And so we're in a great place. Purchase cycles have slowed down a little bit because there was so much of a pull forward, and we're managing and budgeting and forecasting around that. But thankfully, golf's in a great place, and there's a lot of investment capital coming into golf, not just in equipment and golf ball and the products that we sell or the adjacencies and businesses we're building into, but club design and club development and instruction, and all of the development mechanics that ultimately make up our industry. So thankfully, and I'm knocking on wood in front of everybody, golf's in a very strong place right now, stronger we've been in my 30 years in this industry and my 20 years at TaylorMade. And I've been here a couple of different times, left a couple of times, but I couldn't be more thrilled with the baseline that's been established that we can build upon now for the long term. We're in a good state.
Well, that's great to hear because obviously, yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, it was hard to get a tea time. Everybody was out and doing stuff. So I kind of thought a lot of people would, after the pandemic, go back to whatever their regular activities. But you're saying they kind of stuck with golf. So are you forecasting kind of a 3 to 4% growth in kind of rounds, participation, all that type of thing going forward? Is that kind of where you're thinking it's going to be?
Yeah, we're going to be, the next 24 months, we're going to be a bit more conservative at TaylorMade than we typically are. Has nothing to do with the advanced technology that we're bringing to market, because what we will launch in 2024 will be arguably one of the most significant technical platforms we've ever had. And I'd like to say a bit self-serving, but I don't think anyone's innovated more in golf than TaylorMade. Others have certainly innovated, but no one's brought advanced technology to market the way we have. But what we're seeing, back to those replacement cycles, is those replacement cycles have extended themselves a little bit because consumers are really sifting through the products that they bought more frequently, or more recently, I should say, than they historically would. So we're essentially managing roughly rounds played being up in the low single digits, participation remaining relatively stable against the backdrop of replenishment for advanced purchases through the COVID period. And then certainly that, what we're all affected by is macroeconomic and geopolitical issues, inflationary practices. There are certain price and volume thresholds that we work into our sensitivity analysis to determine whether or not we can continue to grow through price or volume or both. So we're, by no means am I suggesting we're being cautious. We're just being very smart, I think, by using data analytics to forecast our business out. And we'll be very aggressive in terms of the consumer value proposition we bring in our products and our brands.
Okay. And are you seeing a geographic shift? The US used to kind of dominate the golf marketplace. I mean, I'm not sure where Asia is at now from a percentage, or Europe, or so. Is there a geographic shift? Is there a gender shift? Are we seeing more women coming into golf?
Yeah, both. It's if you look at pre-pandemic numbers and post-pandemic numbers, the mix of total participation is still relatively 50-50, half in the United States, half outside the United States. We are seeing some emerging markets get a little bit better. I know there's a lot of bets publicly in different categories and verticals being placed on China's growth or India's growth or even parts of Southeast Asia. Golf benefits from that a little bit, but those governments and government-associated institutions need to get behind sports. One of the big advents was bringing golf into the Olympics a couple years ago, which is good for the last Olympics, which is good for us. That'll continue to show up. But we're not seeing the development of golf in emerging markets like China and like India the way we'd like to. They're growing, but they're not growing relative to their population because they don't have the development and instructional programs in the middle class to really drive the growth of the industry. So we're invested there. We'll continue to stay close to it. But we're not seeing that. What we are seeing is really great gender diversification and demo diversification by age. So a lot of the 6 to 8 million golfers, in fact, the larger percentage, majority of them that came into the game, Edward, were women and juniors. Oh, okay. That is exceptional, because when golf becomes even more of a family activity, the long tail demand curve that is behind that is advantageous to the sport itself. So in the United States alone, we saw roughly 60% of the new participants be women and juniors. That's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And the US has a substantial base of development platforms, whether it's through the American Junior Golf Association, local development programs for women, the Make Golf Your Thing initiative by the PGA of America, which we got behind immediately to help provide a better platform, a more accessible platform, a friendlier platform for those that may be intimidated by this game to come into this and actually embrace it. So again, those metrics that we pay very close attention to should yield near-term and long-term sustainable growth orientation for our business and our industry.
Well, that's great. I mean, so not a big geographic shift, but more women and children coming into the game. How about this on-course versus off-course? And I know you're invested in that, and we're going to talk a bit about that down the road. But there seems to be a lot of activity going on now where golf is not just being done on the golf course. And as you talked about Asia, in some countries, they don't have the land or to go and build courses, but they can build some facilities. What's that mix like for you? Is that kind of becoming a bigger deal, the off-course activities?
I think it is. We come from the standpoint that anybody, whether they have played the game and stopped playing, whether they currently play the game or whether they're thinking about playing the game. If you put a golf club in somebody's hands, whether they're putting or whether it's a full swing or whether it's a chip or a putt, whatever it is, that's a good thing. It's like, hey, I go out in my front yard and I'll shoot free throws with my kids. At least I have a basketball in my hands, and maybe I'll decide to, join the men's league down at the local rec club, something. So getting people into the game, we don't discriminate where they get into the game. We just wanted to put a golf club in their hands and experience the euphoria of making a putt or hitting a shot. So this really recent and aggressive development of what we call off-course experiential golf is on the move. Top Golf, and I think I saw Chip that was maybe a speaker as part of one of these forums. They made that acquisition of Top Golf a couple of years ago, and that's an interesting, I'm sure he shared why they did that and how they think it's important to them. We're big advocates of Top Golf. We want people to go in and hit golf shots. We've made a similar investment in a different concept that we think is a more sustainable concept for TaylorMade and more aligned with our brand values and how we think we can grow our audience, which is in a concept called PopStroke. It's a partnership between TaylorMade, PopStroke Entertainment, and Tiger Woods. We can come back to that if you want to talk a little bit more of that. But more broadly, we're seeing more and more both off-course participation in terms of ranges, putting facilities, indoor simulation. The use of simulated technology indoors right now is awesome. Edward and I were talking to everybody else on this call about spending a little bit of time. Where do we spend our time in the winter? I'm spending a bit more time up in the mountains, but I love going indoors because I can hit golf balls in our simulator and be able to actually, keep my game relatively sharp and play with my kids or play 18 holes at any golf course I choose to. So there is so much advanced technology now in the game that is forming this off-course base of participation that, quite frankly, for the first time since it's been tracked, which is only the past several years, there are more off-course golf participants than there are on-course traditional golf participants right now. So 56 to 58 million playing traditional golf on an 18 or 9-hole facility. You've got more than that, upwards of 70, 80 million people that are experiencing some level of indoor, entertained, gamified golf. And that's awesome. But quite frankly, to be honest with you, I've yet to see data in the correlation of conversion to traditional golf. But at some point in time, you've got to believe in theory that will be helpful to us. And when it does, I think we'll all benefit. So it's an exciting time.
That's great. So one of the things which is not unique about golf, but certainly is different than most industries, is the whole sports marketing side of things. TaylorMade's been a huge player with, in terms of having a terrific tour presence, number one driver for many, many years type of thing. So can you talk a bit about that? Because I know when I was at TaylorMade and had the budget for the sports marketing, it was huge. It's probably even bigger now. You're a much bigger company. So talk a bit about sports marketing and the tour and what you think that does for TaylorMade, and is it a good investment?
Yeah. At the highest level of our sport, and even strategically at TaylorMade, we believe in a concept called the pyramid of influence. Edward, that may resonate with you from your time here in the past. And that pyramid, may shift or morph in its strategic kind of practice, but in terms of its influence and its importance, it really hasn't moved. So let me start with golf's a participation sport, and it's also a very aspirational sport. And regardless of what consumer research will tell you, golfers want to know what Tiger, Rory, Colin, Scotty, Nella, Brooke, I'm being biased with our athletes. We have the all-star team of athletes, thankfully, because they believe in our technology, they believe in our culture, they believe in the innovation qualities that we bring, which is why they've come to us. But I want to know as a golfer, and those that are out of the industry want to know, what's Tiger playing right now over my left shoulder when he's making his comeback at Hero in the Bahamas right now? Well, he's playing our new driver right now, and our website is lighting up, even though we haven't even launched the products yet, with inquiries about what is happening and when can I get it? And it looks cool, and it must go further, or it goes faster, or it's more forgiving. So the notion of sports marketing for us is validating the performance of our products through the very best players in the world. That gives us all the entry point and the right to say, you know what, if it's good enough for them, certainly it must be good enough for me, because they make their living doing it. And not only make their living doing it, they are iconic in how they play, as Tiger hits his tee shot right now on number 16. So that's number one.
You've got a TV in the corner. Is that what you're looking at? Yeah. That's great.
But number two is, and this is really, really important, in modern marketing and how we drive our comms plans, our communications plans, and our brand and product plans and initiatives to consumers, we can't create great content without them. It's like trying to create a movie without an actor or an unknown actor. You can go to the Screen Actors Guild and find a couple of C and D listers, and you're not going to draw a big audience. You find the A-listers and you populate a good movie and produce something, you're going to have people that come and watch and at least will express some interest in you. So anyway, these athletes, both men, women, and juniors, part of our NIL program, they create content with us. I came back last week from what we call our super shoot just before Thanksgiving. And our super shoot, we spend 2 days with our athletes. We're down in South Florida at a new private club called Apogee. And we shot literally 2 days worth of content, almost 2,000 hours of content that we will then distribute through our social channels, through our media channels, through our traditional and earned media channels over the course of the next 12 months, and launching the products and instruction and connection to our brand. So they are incredibly important to what we do, because without them, our brand, as strong as it is, would have a hollow basin to it, because it's not played by those that we all aspire to either watch or entertained by or inspired by.
Okay. And talking of the tour, I mean, over the last couple of years, we've seen this split. Live Golf came along, etc. There's talk about it getting back together. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, our take is, and we haven't measured our words in our position, and that's kind of the company we are. We don't like the dilution of the game at the highest level, quite frankly. And not taking sides on the tour or live, but when you start to bifurcate talent at the highest level, and I can't show up at Genesis and see Brooks Koepka and Dustin play alongside Tiger and Rory or Colin, I'm not getting the best product, right? And that's a problem. And that's not good for golf. Now, in the near term, it creates, some controversy. It creates an apprehensive, kind of a bit of an active tension, which is not a bad thing. It creates a voice, even a bolder voice around golf. But the net effect is we want the best players in the world playing golf and competing together, because that's ultimately what drives our industry. Do I think we'll get back to that? Yes. Do I think Live is a bit of a catalyst to contemporize certain facets of golf entertainment at the competitive level? I absolutely do. Do I think it's the only way to do it? I absolutely don't. So I think there are traditional tournaments and major championships that have legacy and tradition that we're building upon, even as, those get better and more important. But I also think Live has opened the eyes to golfers that there are other ways to play golf. There are other formats to play golf. And to some degree, that's exciting to some, bringing a younger generation into the game. So we're big fans of innovation around the game and competitive performance at the highest level and all the way down through the recreational level. We're not big fans of the dilution of the game at the highest level. And I am very hopeful, and we're playing our part to the extent that we can to try to influence these two institutions to find some common ground and build a world tour that's worthy of the best players playing together, so that we can all plug in, whether it's through television, live stream, socially, and see those players compete at the highest level with the best talent together.
Okay, that's great. So obviously the tours are enormously important for you. So one final industry topic is the rollback of distance and the golf ball. And for some of those who aren't aware, there's some discussions at the highest level. Some of these tours I've been talking about, or the governing bodies talking about rolling back the distance on the golf ball. Clearly, Titleist is a dominant or a very big player in the golf ball business. You're a big player in the golf ball business. Where are you at on rolling back and having a different ball for tour players versus for guys like me and recreational players?
This is going to sound self-serving, but I feel like saying this just to impress those that are on the phone. Titleist is dominant, but not nearly as dominant as they used to be. Correct. Because they've got TaylorMade running really hard, gaining a lot of share quickly. And if you haven't, here's my pitch. If you haven't tried a TP5 or 5X golf ball, you should, if you play golf, because we've got a product that is clearly the market leader in performance through our lens and through obviously these players that we've talked about, and we're gaining share there. So the USGA, their charter, their mandate is to govern the game of golf and try to protect the traditions of the game of golf. At TaylorMade, we don't use the word tradition a whole lot. We're respectful of the game, but we like to advance the game. And anything that would push up against advancement, which is building products, whether it's our golf ball, our equipment, new categories we'll enter into in the future, accessories, gloves, headwear, that isn't an innovative concept to enhance performance, because the mission of our company is to be the best performance golf brand in the world.
Right.
And if you really break those words down, I won't do it for us today. Those are powerful words, right? Best performance, golf, world. I mean, those are big words. But why we exist as a company is ultimately to help golfers of all ability play better. And so rolling back technology is the antithesis of helping golfers of all ability play better. So, for example, I actually believe there will be a rollback. I don't believe that rollback's going to happen tomorrow, but I do think that the USGA has laid enough foundation in their own positioning and their perspectives and their research to indicate that they're trying to protect certain golf courses or some of the skill related to the game. I don't agree with it. I respect the USGA. I just don't agree with them on this particular topic. But I do think they've been at it long enough, have been vocal long enough, have been public long enough, have had their response periods through their protocols long enough, which they've been wonderful about including us in that process. I think they're ultimately going to make a decision at some point in time in the not too distant future that they will roll back. Now, when will that decision go into effect? I think that's going to be longer term. I don't think they're going to disrupt the industry right now. I think it takes time for manufacturers and consumers to adopt the new technology. And honestly, I don't think it's going to be so dramatic that we're going to see significant changes. But you could see, based on their proposals and some of the things that they have published, you could see 8 to 10 yards for a professional player on tour, in a new golf ball that's shorter. And Edward, I'll kind of land this plane on this topic of discussion. I have yet in my 30 years in the golf business and my 40 years of playing competitive golf, I have yet to walk off the 18th green and see any member of my foursome say, hey, this game is way too easy for me and I'm hitting way too far, so I'm going to go take up bowling. That's not happening. Right. We like distance. We think consumers buy distance because it helps them play better. But I do think that the USGA is going to, and the R&A, it's not just the USGA alone. I think they've put and laid the foundation for their decision, even though they haven't publicly said anything. I do think there'll be a rollback. What does it mean commercially for us? I think we'll get through it. We have some advanced technology that even with a rollback will enable us to provide even better performance. And even graduated performance by different players with different swing speeds. And I can get all engineering on everybody. I'm not going to. I think, lower swing speed players will see less, if almost no deterioration through our products in the future with a rollback, and the better players with higher swing speeds and ball speeds, subsequent ball speeds might see a little bit more, but we're going to be just fine.
Okay, good. And I would echo David's comment about the TaylorMade golf balls. Titleist has always been my nemesis when I was in the golf ball industry. And so, I played the other day, TP5X, fantastic golf ball. If you play in the Pro V1, haven't tried it, got to try it. Everybody plays the Pro V1 because it's just force of habit, but I think that's better golf balls. Let me talk about... sorry about the plug. Let's talk about TaylorMade golf. Okay, so you came back in 2015. And you had a lot of work to do. It was a bit of a turnaround. So tell us what was it like when you came back, and what did you do, and how did it work out?
Yeah, my wife reminded me, Edward, last night that in 2024, I'm entering my 10th year in my current role, which I've got enough bruises and scars like we all do running these businesses, enough gray hair, less of it over the last 9 years leading into my 10th to tell a lot of stories. But it's interesting. When I first came, I've had 3 tours of duty at TaylorMade. The most recent one being as the CEO of the company. I left the organization in 2013 because I had a strategic disagreement with the existing leadership of the company. Our CEO was who pioneered TaylorMade for many years and did a lot of great work for the company and for the industry. He and I just didn't see eye to eye strategically on where the business should go. And that's fine, that happens. But when 1 and 2 don't necessarily correlate strategically, it's not usually a good formula for the rest of the organization. I respectfully decided to move on. I had an opportunity, as you mentioned earlier, to go run another company. And so I moved on and did that to give me some experience and at least a different perspective away from golf for the first time in my career. But my hope and my desire and my heart was always to come back into the industry and honestly, specifically to come back to TaylorMade. And I'll never forget in 2013, in early spring, walking out of the building as an employee of the company, saying to myself, I sure hope that I'm wrong in how I'm thinking about things, because if I am, then things will be just fine for our people and things will move forward and there'll be growth and everybody will prosper and benefit from that growth. And I remember saying to myself, if I'm right, boy, this is going to be a rough couple of years for the company. And all of us have been in these situations. No company is perfect every year, and you strive for perfection. And my old boss used to tell me this, right? Strive for perfection and accept greatness. Well, I know we were striving for greatness, but I was concerned about what the downside was. And again, I moved on. I got a phone call in January 2015 from our parent company at the time, Adidas, and the board chair of Adidas and TaylorMade was a wholly owned subsidiary of Adidas worldwide, vertical organization within their corporate construct, saying, hey, listen, the company's fallen on hard times. Would you consider coming back? And honestly, I would say this. It was one of the great phone calls I've ever had professionally in my life, because I couldn't get back here fast enough. I missed it every day. I love our people. I love our brand. And I remember coming back in this organization in spring of 2015 in my current role. And the first thing I did is stop by office to office to see if there were some employees and associates that were still here when I left, or some new, and just to get a sense of how people were feeling and how people were thinking. But more importantly, Edward, to get a sense of what are we focused on and what are we trying to accomplish? And I remember when I came back, the media wanted to do some writing and some reporting on the new CEO that's come back to TaylorMade, which is great. It's a prolific brand around the world. There's a new leader in place, pretty commonplace for everybody on this call. And I remember saying, the question was, hey, the company's lost quite a bit of market share. You don't report publicly, but the parent company is reporting that the company's losing money. What's really happening there? And my comment was, you probably find it somewhere if you Google it, was, yeah, we're a bit out of balance right now, but we'll find a great rhythm and return to leadership. Out of balance was a nice way for saying this was an unmitigated mess. It was a disaster, starting with, our people. They didn't believe in the future. They didn't know what to believe in. I'd say it like this. The brand and the business had a major identity crisis. We didn't know at the time who we were after 34 years in being business. What were we trying to do? Who were we? And fortunately, the consumer market still recognized the brand as a great brand, but they weren't buying our products because they were confused as to, this isn't what I fell in love with for the last 34 years. They've changed their product cycles. They've changed their brand initiatives. Their tone has changed. Their distribution has gotten way too broad. They've lost their premium nature. I still want to buy them because I remember what it used to be like, but I don't like it right now. And the fact of the matter is we all own this brand, not just me or our team. We all own it. And when consumers start voting against it and buying less of it, we got a problem. And the biggest thing I faced was the senior leadership team that I came back to, most of whom were here when I left, didn't even acknowledge that we had a problem.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so we had an identity crisis, which then led to quite a bit of ambiguity strategically here, because if you don't know who you are or what you want to be, how do you design a strategic plan to accomplish it? And it ultimately led to, a workforce adrift. And so back to this, walking down the halls into the office, I'll never forget, I walked into one of our point of sale managers' offices who does all of our retail point of sale. And I said to her, wonderful lady, sharp as a tack, great energy, incredibly creative. What are you working on? She says, oh, I'm working on everything. What do you mean everything? Well, every day it kind of changes. There's a different directive coming down from the senior team, given the fact that something went wrong in the market and then some competitor did something different in the market. So I keep pivoting almost on a day-to-day basis in the things that I thought mattered, but I'm not sure what really matters. So I'm doing a little bit of everything. Oh. That conversation in itself is telling, right?
Right.
So that began the turnaround, right? And it was almost an instantaneous, immediate line in the sand that no more. And as painful as this is going to be, we're going to do it aggressively. We're going to make the appropriate changes in our personnel. We're going to restructure the organization. We're going to set a new pathway in mission and strategy, which will then we can resource around structure and initiative. And I'll never forget the speech I gave to the organization, which is we're going to make a lot of hard decisions. Some of you will love them and be inspired by them, and some of you may not. But what I can tell you definitively at this point in time is that the financial results of this organization will be a lagging indicator of the decisions we make right now.
Mhm.
And on a go-forward basis, we will make the right decisions on behalf of this brand aligned with our strategic intent to ultimately return to leadership in this industry. And then we had the entire mapping of what that looked like. I went off site for 2 weeks with the executive team. Within literally 2 months, I transitioned 3/4 of the executive team out of the organization, not because they weren't good people,
Right.
wonderfully nice people. They loved the company. They were intelligent. But what happened here, Edward, is that everybody was leaning on experience as the greatest asset of the organization. And as most of us know that have led people, experience is a great asset. It's also equally your greatest liability.
Right.
Because if you're leaning on experience with no innovative, creative thoughts around new ideation, around new pathways to improve, experience is going to return you to yesterday and not bring you to tomorrow.
Right.
And that's what we had. And more so, there wasn't an acceptance what was wrong. I mean, literally, we were burning through $150 million a year in cash.
Ooh.
Our sales had gone from 1.1 billion in TaylorMade only sales to $550 million in 24 months.
Wow.
That's what we walked into. And so, the storyline from there is, put the right fundamentals in place, get the right people in place, invest deeply in the culture of innovation, which we've done. Make sure you really focus on talent and development and align that to the things that you're trying to do that you think is right. And never lose focus that we're built around, brand, product, and you got to monetize it, right? And so if we do those things and focus on those things and support it with the greatest culture in the history of this game, and I can spend hours on how we developed the culture here. This company, TaylorMade, for 2 consecutive years now, first time in the history of golf, has been named. This is the thing I'm most proud of. It's not the growth orientation, the profitability, selling the company. For the last 2 years, TaylorMade has been named Newsweek's most loved workplace, top 100 in the country.
Wow, that's great.
All industries. And that's the thing for me that I'm most proud of. So we entered into, amongst the locker room, a mess.
Right.
And thankfully, we hired the right people. We aligned to a shared vision. We identified what we're going to do strategically with crystal clarity. Then we resourced around that. We communicated that not only to our business and our corporate headquarters here in Carlsbad, but every vertical around the world and every business unit around the world. I was home, I think, maybe 60 nights the first year. And it started. And it took us about 18 months to return to profitability, which was faster than I expected. It really was. I thought it would take us 24 to maybe 24 months to get there. We got there in 18 months. And we started to gain profitable market share, not gain market share at the expense of margin. We started to rebuild our price positioning in the market. We cleaned up our distribution. We focused on digital transformation and audience development. We built an data analytics group to help navigate through the difference between intuitive decisions and database decisions in the intersection between both of those. We rebuilt the structure of our sports marketing team. We had 400 contracted athletes around the world, 396 of them. This group would have no idea who they are, other than the fact that we can use that group to claim that we had the #1 driver on tour in terms of count. But quite frankly, my 2 years away, no one cared about manufacturer claims anymore. They cared about manufacturer performance and influence socially around who's playing it so they can get inside their lifestyle. So today we have 75 contracted athletes on the professional tours around the world, but we didn't have Tiger Woods then. We didn't have Rory McIlroy then. We didn't have world #1 Scotty Scheffler, world #1 Nelly Korda then. We didn't have any of them. And today we do, and they come with audiences in the millions. And so that audience development movement, where at the push of a button through the use of our athlete audience and our owned audience, we now have the second largest consumer audience in the world of golf, second only to the PGA Tour.
Oh.
So all of this was part of the construct back in 2015 and 16. And every year that we found improvement and celebrating and recognizing record growth and profitability, which has been wonderful. Those results have been just fantastic for all of us. But every year we come back to a January meeting where our senior team and key members of our leadership team outside of my direct reports challenge our mission and strategy every year. So we never go back to, yeah, that's good. Let's just keep doing that. And so there's an intensity that shows up in one of our brand credos that you'll see actually publicly that says Beyond Driven. If you look at TaylorMade's advertising, it's TaylorMade Beyond Driven. The culture of this organization can be summed up very simply. This is a performance-driven authentic golf culture. And if you to define the characteristics of the people we hire, we are driven to continue to find new pathways to innovate and succeed. Innovate beyond the performance of our products. Innovate in terms of our brand initiatives, our operational practices, our commercial engagements, our partnerships, our supply chain. We innovate everywhere. We innovate in our administrative functions through our development programs and our people and how we assess our talent and also develop our talent and succession planning and advancement. We innovate in finance. How can we be more effective in utilizing finance as a strategic weapon, whether it's in forecasting or accounting, as opposed to a scoreboard keeper, right? And so I think we've done a really good job. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. But we strive for perfection, and we're finding some greatness right now.
That's a lot of changes. The leadership team, the focus, the sports marketing, and during that time frame, you went from being owned by Adidas to KPS, etc. And presumably, they were supportive of some of the things you're doing, because obviously, a lot of people think when you get into owned by a PE firm, they're going to be like, "Hey, it's profit, profit, profit." But it sounds like they bought into the vision.
Well, they certainly did, right? I mean, no PE firm, and maybe we have some PE experts on the call as well. I've never met, and I've been around PE for a long time. I've never met a PE group that didn't, do some real rigor in their diligence about making an acquisition and have a perspective on the entry thesis and investment thesis, and certainly an exit thesis. And whether it's KPS or now Centroid, there's no difference there. So absolutely, they bought into what we were doing, because they had a chance, KPS in particular, had a chance to see the turnaround of the company, the progress we were making, and our strategic plan, and where we saw, real opportunity to create real value in the business in a growth orientation, profitable growth orientation. So they absolutely believed in it. And, but even those transition points, Edward, looking back now, those are inflection points for people, right? I mean, this company was founded in 1979 by an entrepreneur named Gary Adams in McHenry, Illinois, in the middle of Chicago. Right. So we were owned by a sole proprietor, an entrepreneur, an innovator of his sorts. He brought a metalwood to market. You know the story, where we were transitioning laminated and persimmon into metal. I mean, that's a crazy concept 44 years ago. But look what's happened since then. And he led that. He sold the company to a French conglomerate, a ski company called Salomon. Right. So now we're owned from Gary Adams, independent sole proprietor in Chicago, owned by a multinational ski equipment manufacturer, Salomon, that thought it would be cool to have opposing seasonal cycles and have golf and ski. So now we're owned by a French conglomerate in ski and in Salomon. From Salomon, Adidas acquires Salomon. So now we're a German sportswear company holding the TaylorMade assets. From the German sportswear company for 20 years, then we're acquired by a New York-based PE firm, and then we ultimately sold the company from a New York-based PE firm to a Korean group of investors that are based in Seoul. So I joked with our team when we were going through this process, at some point in time, we'll touch every continent in ownership and every profile in ownership. But if you ask all of our 2,000 employees that have been through some of this, does ownership really matter to you? They'll say, hey, of course it does. But what really matters to us is if we execute our plan, and we can actually deliver against what we think we can do, it doesn't really matter who's owned us, because we're going to grow and we're going to find success. And we don't focus on who owns us. We focus on what we need to do to accelerate and amplify the growth of TaylorMade. And fortunately, every owner we've had, certainly since I've been here, has felt some of that. Adidas felt it in the first transaction when they came out better than they thought that they would. That was part of the mandate when I came back, was fix it, sell it. And we couldn't get this thing out of Adidas fast enough. I couldn't get it out of here fast enough, because we needed to be a vertically privately held golf equipment company, then expand into golf ball, and then lead into these other adjacencies that you'll see next year. So I couldn't get us private fast enough, and that's been a huge win for us. But thankfully, year after year after year, we've executed well. We've grown, and all of our owners have benefited from that.
That's great. I mean, obviously the numbers I don't think are public, but KPS probably bought it for a relatively good value, certainly compared to what the enterprise value you've created. And then you sell it again, or they sell it in 2021, presumably at a pretty high price, because we're in the middle of the pandemic, et cetera, going on there, et cetera, and golf is on a tear. So you must have a new challenge now, because you got it, sold it at a high price, and you got to keep going from there.
Yeah. When KPS bought us in 2017, we didn't have industry leadership and equipment at the time, but we had a clear pathway to do that. So they bought us on the basis of, and KPS is interesting. And honestly, I think they will go down as one of the best owners in the history of this company. And I still remain very connected with them because KPS's background is essentially in industrial manufacturing. It's not in consumer branded products. So you might say, well, why did you pick them? Was it that they had the best offer? They actually didn't. There were other offers that were better. I was able to convince our board at Adidas that, take the deal because they'll execute on it. It'll get done. But more importantly, it's better for TaylorMade long-term. And great sellers also recognize they want to sell for success over time. So KPS came in and we chose them not because they brought the right thinking around the capital requirements of the business and making sure that our balance sheet was very clean and how they financed our deal enabled us to have enough free cash flow to invest in growth. They were fantastic that way. They financially engineered this beautifully. But what I loved about them was how can you help us make more technical, higher performing products at lower cost? And they're in the automotive industry, aerospace. They build complicated products. And they're one of the best PE firms in the world right now. They just raised, I think, another almost $10 billion in Fund 6. These guys are amazing. And they're incredible people. Incredible people. So culturally, it was a good fit. Strategically, it was a great fit. We didn't need help on the front end. We had solved brand, we had solved design, we had solved distribution, we had solved athlete. We needed help with the operational infrastructure as we carved out from Adidas. And KPS stepped right in with their operations team in partnership, truly in partnership, and helped us do that. So yeah, I mean, the return on that investment, even to this day, was, I think, the single greatest multiple they've ever received on any investment they've ever had. And that's great. We're proud of that. You can read it publicly. We didn't report it. They didn't report it. But what's been reported is relatively accurate. We exited at roughly a $2 billion valuation on something that was dramatically less than that when they bought us in 2017. And that set, a new and continues to be, at least viewed as the highest valued private transaction in the history of the golf industry. Now, two of our public peers have stronger market caps than that. But they're different companies. So they bought us on essentially some of those fundamentals that I share with you, but on equipment leadership in developing a golf ball business. We sold on equipment leadership. We're now the number one equipment company in the world. And we have a real challenger position in golf ball, back to this, construct and some fun between us and Titleist. Right. We had 3%, 4% global market share in golf ball just 4 years ago. We have 18% now.
That's huge.
And and so we're gaining share. And when you had a market leader, the way and Titleist, a great company, great brand, great products, fully diversified portfolio of products, equipment, ball, gloves, accessories, apparel, footwear. I mean, go right down the line. They've built a beautiful company there over 75 years. We have a lot of respect for them. But we're still in our growth curve, right? And so equipment leadership we sold on. Challenging for leadership in golf ball. Mark my words, by 2027, just 4 short years from now, we believe we'll be challenging for leadership. We may not get all the way there, but we're going to be in the 25 and 30% market share range, which means the leader's going to come down. Others are continue to find a little bit. This is going to be a 2 or 3 horse race to see who becomes the new number one golf ball in the world. And we think selfishly that will be us. But now what we're moving into is a very different generation of TaylorMade. We have 4 businesses, no longer 1 or 2. 1 being equipment, 2 being golf ball. We now have the entertainment business and PopStroke, which is this partnership, as I mentioned earlier. First half of next year, we're going to launch what we call TaylorMade Lifestyles. I can't give you too much on that right now, but it'll be our foray into the apparel and footwear business. We're building our own brand with a very unique positioning that will extend from golf into golf lifestyle and into broader lifestyle to further leverage our global distribution, our audience, and bring some products to market that we think the world of golf and the world outside of golf is going to be inspired by. So what we're going to sell the next time around is no longer just a hope or growth orientation on equipment or growth on equipment and golf ball. It's a fully comprehensive, well-diversified organization that can mitigate risk in certain verticals if we deal with certain situations and still find a growth orientation across the portfolio. It's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the apparel business obviously is huge. I know Callaway's brought a couple of brands. So let me go back to the third business you just mentioned, PopStroke. This audience may not know much about that. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and how that differentiates from Topgolf.
Yeah, it's a very different model. I mean, it's an outdoor entertainment model. So we PopStroke is essentially 36 holes of synthetic putting designed by Tiger Woods. There are no clown's nose. There's no windmills. This is not traditional miniature golf with a, with an elephant at the end and you not try. It's not like that. This is really great putting courses. And then just adjacent as part of the property, we build these properties out on roughly 2 to 2.5 acres worth of land. So it's much more accessible than some of the other models that you see. We don't need story poles. We don't need aviation conformance. We can move faster. The capital layout to build them is dramatically less. But we also have a restaurant, an outdoor entertainment space there as well. Great food, as you might expect, great entertainment, sports bar per se. We have 10 of them now across the country, all in Sunbelt markets because they're outdoor. We'll be testing a cold weather climate model in Nashville this year, 2024. If that works out, we'll begin to migrate north. But we're going to open one PopStroke a month for the next 24 months. And it's been an amazing. The unit economics on these facilities, honestly, it's one of the best golf businesses, if not the best golf business I've ever seen, because it's not just a golf business, it's an entertainment business. But here's what we loved about it. The Topgolf model, which is working very well for Chip and Callaway, and we hope it continues to, again, good for golf, is 25 to 35, mostly singles, some families from time to time, and it's a bar experience. And that's a pretty decent demo. When I first experienced the first PopStroke before we co-invested and partnered in it, and we wrote a sizable check to be partners in this, I showed up at the East Orlando location, Edward, and it was September, which is not the greatest time to be in Orlando. It's hot and steamy. I was meeting the founder of PopStroke, a gentleman named Greg Bartoli. It's his genius in this business. He and I had developed some relational equity and really thought at length about how the TaylorMade partnership could really accelerate growth through capital resources, through brand resources, a lot of synergies. So I get to this East Orlando location. It was their third or fourth location at the time. We weren't in yet. And it's hot. It's 95 degrees, 90% humidity. And I'm looking at the line out the door. It's 2 acres of land, 36 holes of putting, 2 18-hole golf courses designed by Tiger. And I'm looking from the outside in. The restaurant is filled with people. There's kids getting milkshakes and ice cream cones down the other end in the kids section. In line to get in was a girls' soccer team, a 5-year-old kid that had his own putter in his hands, cut down, and his 75-year-old grandfather, a group of women on their bachelorette party, and a bunch of guys that just want to go out and putt and compete with each other. So very quickly, just identifying the profile of who's going to attend these facilities and participate, it's everybody.
Wow.
And it's very engaging. It's easy to play. You don't have to swing a golf club. You're not embarrassed by, did I hit it or didn't I? Did I get it into a target or didn't I? I can hit a couple of putts, and if I want to pick it up and put it in my pocket, I can, because your max score is on your card, you move on. Or if you want to compete, like in the PopStroke Tour Championship that we brought to market against Colin Morikawa or Scotty Scheffler, you can do that to Ricky Fowler last year, our guy. So in the end, that's what it means to us. I believe that PopStroke over time will be the winner in all of these entertainment venues, both in terms of the total experience and the total engagement, total participation, but also in terms of the pure business financials that come from this, that enable us to reinvest in other areas of our company and certainly reinvest in the organic growth of PopStroke. Couldn't be more thrilled with it. If you want to, again, I don't sound pitchy now, just go to popstroke.com and you'll see it. It's fascinating. PopStroke, POPSTROKE.com.
So obviously 1 a month, I mean, that's a much faster rate than Topgolf is opening because they're much more capital intensive. You said that it's limited at this stage to the Sunset because of its outdoors. So is it always going to be outdoor, or can you find a way to put a roof over it so you can go up to New England, New York? Or
thanks for coming back to that. Right now we're in Sunbelt markets, Florida, Texas, Arizona. We're looking into Southern California. We'll open up Vegas just before the Super Bowl. We'll open up Frisco next month. So everything's Sunbelt right now. What we're testing is a cold weather model in Nashville, which is an enclosed PopStroke. So think about a retractable roof. We're testing it to make sure it works. We're also testing to make sure that the unit economics on a construction story like that is favorable to us. What we're seeing so far is that it is. We're also in college towns. We'll be in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We'll be at Auburn. We'll be at Clemson. And I mean, so what's happening with these college kids, and these are different models, right? They're prefabricated models, 18-hole facilities that we can turn around literally in 60 to 90 days and be in the ground and up and running. That's how this model's, it's fantastic. I couldn't be more thrilled with it. And again, we've just helped accelerate it. Greg Bartoli's the genius behind it. He's done a masterful job.
And we're nearly out of time, but let me ask one final question. So you're obviously incredibly passionate, enthusiastic about TaylorMade, but as your wife said, you've been there a long time. So what's your game plan? What are you going to do? You're going to keep with TaylorMade for a long time? What do you want to do?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I started my career with TaylorMade right out of college, 1994, 1995. I was a local salesman. I cut my teeth carrying a bag selling golf clubs when we couldn't rub two nickels together. We couldn't even talk about half the stuff we're talking about now. We're just trying to sell some woods and maybe get paid for them by our customers. I was the local rep in the metropolitan section in New York, which is where I'm from. And I remember being out on Long Island, and a local media writer for a magazine called Long Island Golfer called and said, "Hey, can we interview you? It looks like, you know, you're out here selling golf clubs, and TaylorMade's launched a new technology. You know, can we interview you about what your job is like?" And I didn't even know it at the time. I was 21 or 22 years old, and I get in this interview. It's like probably the first interview I'd ever done. And they said, "What's it like working at TaylorMade?" I said, "Well, you know, working at TaylorMade is more of a lifestyle than it is a job, you know, and believe me, we all work our tails off." But I would like to think that quote, and it's funny, I celebrated my 20th year here. I mean, I was gone a couple of times, but in aggregate, I celebrated 20 years this year. Someone found that quote and put that up in the building, that, you know, working at TaylorMade is a lifestyle, not a job. So, you know, what's the end game for me? I love what I do. More importantly, I love who I do it with. And like you, Edward, and like I'm sure everybody on this call, I've had a lot of opportunities to do other things, exciting things, interesting things. I've taken some of those opportunities and left twice to do them. But at this stage in my career, I got a lot of gas in the tank. My ambition is to see this next round of growth really manifest itself into something that we could have never dreamed of. And I think we've already achieved a lot of dreams, but this dream of this comprehensive golf company that has an entertainment vertical, an apparel and footwear vertical, leading equipment company, leadership position in golf ball, I think we can create the greatest golf company ever built. And some might say, hey, maybe you've done some of that already, but I'm not done yet. And the day I wake up and don't have the same inspiration with our teams, our products, and our brands, the way I would express to you authentically today, is the day I'll say, hey, somebody else needs to do this, but I'm not in. So the end game for me, I don't have an end in sight right now. I might be very different in that regard. The end game is when I can add value here the way I believe I can right now, I will gracefully walk away. But the end game for me is to build this great company and inspire our people while I'm doing it.
Well, you've certainly done a terrific job. You've turned it around. You've grown it. You've diversified it. You're getting it into new businesses with Popstroke and whatever TaylorMade, apparel type story is going to be. So congratulations on that. You are clearly passionate about the business, passionate about the people. You have that intensity that you talked about, that you needed to have. I mean, I can see it, coming through on this discussion. So I want to thank you for that. I know previously I'd asked you, like at some stage, maybe next year, we can bring a small group out to the kingdom, which would be fantastic because it's a wonderful test facility and a lot of great stuff happens there. So, but with that, David, thank you for your time, and thank you everybody for joining today. We are just a couple of minutes late, and I appreciate that, and look forward to seeing some of you on the Aaron Zaslansky call webinar on December 14th. Thanks, David.
Edward, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Appreciate it.